During these hot periods like this in the 70s, and even late 70s, early 80s was hot, what was the money like for the top guys? In the state of Florida, home almost every night if you wanted to be, sun, fun, beaches, weather.
JJ and I talked about this in the early 80s in Florida. The guys, I'm sure when Dusty did this in '74, he was making $150,000. In the 80s, you know, you were making $100,000 if you were working with Dusty.
Yeah.
And
1974, that's 40 years ago.
Right.
$150,000 for those guys figured into that thing. That would be 500 grand now, probably.
At least,
as they say, as the kids say these days, today's money.
Yeah, yeah.
And in one state. And I mean, of course, now, like Dusty, at that point in the mid-'70s, when he started going to Atlanta and he started going to other places, he wasn't making quite as much from Florida, but he was making more because he was starting to cherry-pick his shots.
Yep.
Ole Anderson, talked to him in Charlotte last year, booking the Carolinas and being a booker and a top talent in Atlanta. Also at the same time, he was making $250,000 a year in the late 70s.
Right.
And I think, you know, a lot of the guys these days, that's what they would aspire to now in 2015, but they think that Vince created big money in wrestling. The big money for the majority of people in wrestling was actually before
Absolutely.
Vince McMahon got his hands on it.
Well, Jimmy, I want to just throw something out at you. I read this just, you know, after I read your book, I read some excerpts from Thesz's book, right? When he went to wrestle Ricky Dozan,
yep,
he went for 6 weeks, 12 matches, back in '53. Dozan paid him $300,000. And I read Lou's, you may have seen, there's a YouTube clip where he's running on the beach where he had that hotel, and right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And if you watch him when he's running on the beach, he's saying, I'm working about 2 days a week now. I've cut back. I'm making $5,000 a week on a bad week. These guys just make huge money. When the
Well, in Chicago, the Dumont Network Television, and that's, we're going to cover that in another edition of Back to the Territories, but the U.S. champion, Vern Gagne,
Right.
who was made by Fred Kohler, who ran the Chicago TV, was the only other touring champion besides Thez in the NWA title. He got the same deal. Instead of the NWA and Thez, it was Gagne got 10% of the house,
Wow.
and Kohler got 3% for the booking fee instead of Barnett for the NWA.
Yeah.
So the point is, even at $2 and $3 tickets, when he was going to buildings that were drawing 5 and 6 and 8 and 10,000 people, whether it be Chicago or Milwaukee or wherever, that's $1,500, $2,000 a day on some of these shows. Point is, the top 5 money-earning athletes in the United States, pro athletes in the early 50s, were the world heavyweight boxing champion and 4 pro wrestlers.
Yeah.
Gorgeous George, Vern Gagne, Lou Thez, and somebody else, the TV stars.
Yeah.
The team sports didn't even compare. So, anyway, going back to the original question, long story short, too late.
Yeah.
Guys were making 6 figures, working in the state of Florida in the 70s and in the 80s. And that also was helpful for their career because they knew, as well, get proteges. Eddie Graham had so many proteges. Jack Briscoe, Bill Watts, Dusty Rhodes, yourself. Briscoe, he knew as an NCAA champion,
Right.
was going to be an All-American boy from Oklahoma, great amateur wrestler, clean cut, good look. He groomed him, and it included sending him out to Amarillo so he could
Right.
do jobs for Dorian Terry,
Right,
you know,
right.
which led to some lasting issues. Bill Watts was a protege in terms of he had already been in the business for 10 years, but he learned to book there.
Right.
Dusty was a protege in that he and Dick Murdoch had already been main event guys as the Texas Outlaws, and he already kind of had a clue what he was doing with his deal, but he was shaped in Florida and then made so hot that they were scalping tickets and he was shitting on Jackie Gleason's toilet.
Yeah.
Yourself, who had been in the business in a variety of positions as talent, but actually got a chance to sit in and listen to these things and book and matchmake. He had so much impact on some. Can you think of other people that sat under that learning tree? I mean, everybody that ever worked there, but specifically.
I'll tell you one that if he didn't have an accident, Jimmy, we'd be talking about him being the smartest.
Bobby Shane?
Bobby Shane, by far. He just had it. And the other one was Dickie Slater. You know, when he was in that real bad wreck and he hit his head.
Car wreck, okay, yeah.
He never was the same. I mean, it did something to him, okay?
Had he just watched a videotape of Terry Funk and then he had the car wreck and when he woke up he thought he was Terry?
Yeah, I think so. But I'm telling you, he knew how to work the day he came into the business. He knew how to manipulate. He knew how to do angles. He was a big, burly guy, and he would get the baby face over before he ever threw a punch, you know what I mean? And when he kicked it in gear, the only guy I ever saw do the similar thing to him, kick it in gear and take it to a different level, Paul Orndorff.
Yeah.
Everybody from Florida that made it really made it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they got to see all this great talent, and they got to see it in a different way.
Orndorff, when Orndorff was a rookie, Eddie sent him up to Memphis to work for Jerry Jarrett. And they put the belt, Lawler worked with him. Lawler could work with anybody, whether they'd had a match or not. And they put the belt on him there for a brief time as his first title. But they showed the footage of Orndorff and Bob Backlund working out in the gym, where they did that thing where they did the back bridge, but their legs were entwined, and then they were doing sit-ups with it. It looked like inhuman shit. And these guys are real athletes. Holy shit. 2 weeks of that, and Paul Orndorff was made by the time he got in the ring, and then they put him over David Schultz and some underneath heels. 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. And 4 weeks later, he's Lawler for the title. Boom, one punch, knockout. Boom, wins the belt, and all of a sudden he's over in a month.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's those guys, he had such great raw material, such clay to work with.
Yeah, and you know, you said something that just jumped out at me. They were all athletes. Slater could have played. He could have played for the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah,
he was wrestling.
A hot-shot football player.
Yeah, and he was a very good amateur wrestler. Paul Orndorff. I mean, he went to the pros football. Yeah. I mean, you look at it. Jack Briscoe, Gerald Briscoe. I mean, the basics, the funks. You know what I mean? They all brought legitimacy to the business, especially that's what Eddie wanted. And I find it very ironic that all these guys that were buff and national champions and all that, and ended up with Dusty being the biggest one. Maybe because it was different.
He was different.
Yeah.
If you got a ring full of 7-foot guys, you haven't got any giants. Right?
Yeah.